they'll be sick of it until it'll come out of their noses. Welcome to 7 in 7, where we will explore the weekly Torah portion, which consists of 7 readings in just 7 minutes. This week's Torah portion's name is Beha'alotcha, which is the instruction to the high priest Aaron to light up the menorah every single day. This week's Torah portion is, of course, a continuation from last week's Torah portion, in which we read the story of the leaders of the community, of the tribes, giving their own gifts to the tabernacle, to God. And Aaron requested that he be able to give his own personal gift, and God grants him that gift and tells him that he will be the one to be lighting the daily menorah in the temple. The lesson from this for us is that we all need to be lamplighters, and a close reading of the instruction to Aaron is that he needs to light the candles until they light up by themselves. And of course, the lesson in that is that we need to be lighting up not only our own souls, but also those of the people around us to such a great extent that they are already burning, so to speak, by themselves, and they don't need us to keep igniting that flame every single time. The second reading in this week's Torah portion is the story of the consecration of the Levites, where they are the ones that were instructed to be serving in the temple in the place of the firstborns. And part of that process is they need to shave their hair, they need to bring a sacrifice, they need to dip in a mikvah. And the Torah also tells us the ages of the priests. They would be serving from the age 30 through the age 50, after which they would be moved on to other tasks. It's interesting to note that in verse 19, the Torah uses the word the children of Israel a grand total of 5 times, which seems to be a repetitive amount of times for one single verse to say the same words, the children of Israel. And Rashi and others point out that the lesson here, of course, is that God loves the Jewish people so much that he wants to keep repeating their names, and he does that 5 times, which correspond to the 5 books of Moses, God's other love. The third reading is the story of the second Passover, in which members of the Jewish community found themselves to be ritually impure, which disqualified them from bringing the Paschal offering. They lodge a complaint with Moses, who in turn brings the complaint to God, and God instructs that they be given a second chance. This, of course, is one of the bases of the idea that in Judaism we believe that Sinidakin farfalet, it's never too late. There's always a chance to repair, to fix even something that seems as though the time has passed, and Passover in that situation had already passed, and they thought perhaps it's too late. But nonetheless, we always have, with the right determination and the right conviction, we can always repair what we've done incorrectly. The fourth aliyah, the fourth reading, tells us the story of the Jewish people traveling through the desert. And the Torah says that often they would, or on occasion, they would only rest for a day or two, while some trips would be longer and some trips would be shorter. Nonetheless, they always consistently built the temple. The second part of the reading talks about the story of the trumpets. Moses was instructed to create 2 silver trumpets, which the Jewish people would use, or which Moses would use on various occasions to gather the community, to gather the leaders, to let people know that it was time to travel. At a later date, it would be also used to announce the beginning of a war. The lesson from the story of the tabernacle traveling and the Jewish people traveling is the Torah says that even if they only stopped for one day, they would still build the tabernacle. And the lesson there is a powerful one, that there's no such thing as an in-between time. Even if you may think, I'm only here for a day, I'm only here for a few days, I don't need to settle down, I don't need to be committed. The Jewish people realize that even if you're only in a place for one day, even a few hours, there's always time for a prayer, there's always time to build a tabernacle, especially considering that it took well over 5,000 people to put that together. So that was a big job. And nonetheless, they realized the importance of always having the tabernacle, of valuing every single minute that you possibly can with God. The fifth reading tells the story of the Jewish people leaving the Mount Sinai for after living in that area for almost a year's time, which you may not have noticed, but it doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that they left, and so it actually turns out that they lived right around Mount Sinai for almost a year's time. The cloud that goes in front of them comes up, and that's a sign for them to travel. The language the Torah uses suggests that they were excited to travel, and Rashi points out in the name of the Talmud that they were excited to travel, to leave Mount Sinai like a child is excited to leave the schoolyard. And that means that the Jewish people were scared perhaps there's going to be more commandments coming their way. And so leaving Sinai to them meant that they wouldn't be getting any more Torah, any more mitzvot. And this, of course, is a rebuke to the people, because even though they had been practicing the Torah and practicing the mitzvot, but nonetheless they had been taking it in sort of a negative way, and they were excited that those instructions would come to an end. And so sometimes attitude speaks louder than our actions. And sometimes when we think we're doing the right thing, but we do it with the wrong attitude, that can be detrimental as well. The second section of that Aliyah talks about Moses' father-in-law Jethro, who wants to leave, and Moses tries to convince him to stay. Interestingly enough, the Torah text isn't clear about whether he did agree to stay or not. The sixth Aliyah tells the story of the Jewish people leaving Mount Sinai, and immediately they start kvetching. They start complaining they want meat. They ask Moses. Moses takes it up with God, and he tells God, I can't handle all these people complaining to me, and he insists that he needs help. And he then appoints 70 leaders who will assist him in his leadership. God promises to bring the meat, and God says that they'll have so much, it'll be so abundant that they'll be sick of it until it'll come out of their noses. Moses then gathers the 70 elders, and he brings the Spirit of God upon them. It's interesting to consider the fact that the Jewish people already had the manna, and Jewish tradition has it that the manna tasted just as one would want it to taste. So effectively, they had meat. Theoretically, if they would have wanted the manna to taste like meat, they would have had it. And so effectively, if they wanted meat, they could have envisioned it, they could have had it, and we also know that they had lots of cattle with them. And so really it turns out that they purely just wanted to kvetch. And that's what happens. Sometimes we kvetch, and we get so focused on our own troubles, and we forget the reality around us. And often it turns out that the reality is not nearly as bad as we make it out. The seventh and final Aliyah tells the story of God bringing a plentiful amount of meat with birds flying in, and those who ate too much, those who ate gluttonously, would suffer death in a plague. The final section of the Torah speaks of Miriam and Aaron, Moses' older brother and older sister, who speak negatively of his having left his wife due to a spiritual pursuit. And Miriam gets punished with tzarat, with leprosy, which is the punishment for someone who speaks badly about somebody, since she was the one that initiated that conversation, whereas Aaron was a listener. Because the punishment for the leper is that they have to wait outside the camp for 7 days, the Jewish people were not able to leave without her. And this teaches us a powerful lesson, that the entire Jewish community waited for 7 days for one single individual. But even more powerful is the fact that to consider that if you remember the story when Moses was a baby, the Torah tells us his sister Miriam watched him for a little while, maybe a few hours, maybe a day. And nonetheless, in reward for that, the entire Jewish people, including Moses, waited for 7 days. And the lesson there is that the reward for doing a good deed always gets paid back many more times than the amount of effort that it took. Shabbat Shalom.